Om Tava Kathamritam Tapta Jivanam Kaviviritam Kalpashapaham Shravanamangalam Srimadatam Bhuvigananti Ye Bhurida Janaha. So today we will be discussing a very important topic, which is the importance or the relevance of prayer and japa in the gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. So it's not just from the gospel, but Sri Ramakrishna's biography, Holy Mother's life, where these two aspects of sadhana, there are many ways one can reach God or reality. But these two books, the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna and also the Gospel of Holy Mother, they give a lot of importance to these two particular aspects of spiritual practice. You will find that in other books connected to Ramakrishna Vivekananda literature, especially the complete works of Swami Vivekananda, you will find some stray references to prayer. So many people feel that prayer is something which deals with people who have a lot of devotion towards a personal God in whatever form they accept God, God with form, God with qualities, God with God who has incarnated either as a prophet, or whether you accept him as the Son of God or as just as a prophet. There are a lot of traditions which believe in the repetition of the holy name, or at least in the path of prayer. In fact, in the Semitic religions, Christianity and Islam, they don't give as much importance to the repetition of the name of God, which perhaps according to them is just something which tends to get mechanical as days pass. We just repeat a name. They don't see any reason why one should do it. So prayer is much more appealing to these traditions, and even many of the Indian traditions, where devotion to God often implies that we should pray for various things, depending on what we seek in life. Some people pray for peace, some people pray for grace, some people pray only when there are some issues which they can't possibly solve using all the human efforts, then they turn to God. So prayers are of different kinds, and everybody in some form or the other makes a supplication to whatever concept of God they believe in. And they hope and pray, they hope, and the prayer is accompanied by a certain degree of faith, and they hope that their prayer is answered. How it is answered, how is it really answered? Does God answer our prayers? Or is prayer an effective way of solving the problems of life? Not just spiritual life, but problems which we deal with on a daily basis, which we encounter, because no life is without problems. So when human solutions do not succeed, when worldly solutions do not succeed, after having tried everything humanly possible, with the help of friends, with the help of the advice given by our well-wishers, we come to a conclusion that we need divine intervention. That is perhaps the beginning of religion in most of the traditions. When human mind, especially when in the course of evolution, he found the powers of nature so powerful that there are certain things which are beyond human control, or even beyond the control of all the wonderful techniques with which we have control over nature. Man seems to have controlled many aspects of nature, and it is true. The progress in science, progress in scientific methods have enabled us to have a fair degree of control over things which were previously thought to be uncontrollable, and we would leave everything to destiny. So if you start with the primitive man, he was afraid of natural forces. He was afraid of storms. He was afraid. Even today, people continue. There is hardly anything you can do when natural disasters strike humanity. Then to add to that, there are man-made disasters. Not that they are new to humanity. Man-made disasters were in different forms. Troubled human beings, selfishness, greed, and all these things were not, they are not nothing new. Only their modes have changed. The techniques of exploitation or techniques of exerting a dominance over other human beings has changed. They have become, in fact, more sophisticated, and in the process, it has become more difficult to handle. Earlier, it was just you encounter these problems. There would be wars, straightforward wars. Things were not so complicated, but there are now complicated means and ways. With the development of science, there's a negative side, science and technology, that it has enabled man to use various complicated and complex techniques to extend his domination. So as long as selfishness, greed, and other qualities are not rooted out from the human heart, we will continue to encounter these problems. So the problems have changed in nature, but the problems remain all the same. So you cannot expect, as many people think, that there would be a day, some sort of utopia where people will all be good, all the problems will be solved, all the physical, the mental problems, the social problems, economic problems will be solved forever. So various systems have been tried. Every system came with a fresh ray of hope. But at the same time, along with hope, there were many people who misused those inventions, those discoveries, those techniques. And the very purpose of using this advancement in knowledge and techniques or technology proved disastrous. So it's not possible through human intervention to solve human problems. That is one thing one must be very clear about. That right from time immemorial, since man or human beings try to find out the need for God or religion or spirituality, this was one thing that motivated them, and one thing that came as a conviction to all the prophets, that all the human problems cannot have human solutions or worldly solutions. All the problems which we encounter in the world that we see around us, it can only be solved at the level of the spirit. So you take any religion, any spiritual practice or true religious endeavor, you will find that everywhere the solution is spiritual. The problem may be in the world. And to seek a worldly solution to a worldly problem has proved futile. No matter how many systems have been tried, how many isms have been tried, capitalism, communism, this ism, socialism, and so many other life philosophies or ways of interacting with human beings have been tried. And every person who believes in his own philosophy or own ism. He says that this will solve the problem, permanently solve the problem. This will make society much better. And people keep on thinking that there is a solution. But the prophets who came, now and then prophets have come historically, different parts of the world. They have come and given the same message in their own way, saying that there cannot be a worldly solution to our problems, no matter how intelligent those solutions may be. It can be solved only at the level of the spirit. That is one of the fundamental assumptions that we have to make. That is why when we come to the gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, when Sri Ramakrishna was asked, he said the goal of life can be only one. Realization of God, realization that you are the spirit. And that is just an echo of all the prophets before him, all the spiritual leaders before him. They might have said it in different languages. The Bible, you will find a different way of expressing the same truth. In the Gita, in the Upanishads, in other scriptures of the world, Buddhism, everywhere you will find all these prophets or avatars or saints or whatever category they belong to. They believed in only one solution, that it is the supremacy of the spirit, which is the essence of our spiritual endeavor or spiritual life, the so-called spiritual life, gives us a permanent solution. Not that there are no solutions in the world. There are solutions, but they are at best temporary. So it's like doing some patchwork. Something is wrong, you put a patch, you heal it for the time being, but then it comes in some other form. You don't end up solving that problem permanently. So one thing which the gospel says, which all the scriptures unequivocally say, is there cannot be a worldly solution, however intelligent it may be, to our worldly problems. Someday or the other we'll realize that there can only be a spiritual solution. That is the fundamental basis of all religions and all spiritual practices. Now, coming to the specifics of spiritual practices, there are two things. One is, as Sri Ramakrishna tells in the gospel so beautifully, when devotees used to come, when people used to come to him, most of them came with problems. There was hardly anyone who came, like Narendra, for example, who was his chief disciple, and many others, quite a few, but their number was few. There were only a few who came with a real yearning for God, trying to know what God is, what religion is, what spirituality is, because they were confused. There were too many theories going around in the intellectual circles, in their colleges, and in practice. All around them, they saw there is only confusion in the name of religion. And everyone claims to know everything about spirituality. They used to make exclusive claims that our path is the only path and all others are wrong. You follow our path or you get condemned to hell or whatever. You are doomed. So then naturally, a rational person who was motivated by the scientific spirit, who wanted proof for everything, who believed in the search for truth, if it can be proved. That is the scientific spirit, which has resulted in so much progress in the field of science, that everything, you can't just place an hypothesis in front of the world and say that you have to believe it. No, it has to be proved, verified, either in the laboratory or through any other means. And then it becomes a theory which will be acceptable till it is, of course, proven otherwise. Somebody else comes and proposes a better theory, then he has to give a proof. So this scientific approach to truth when attempts were made to test religion or expose religion to the same scientific method, many of the religions based on superstition, based on wrong thinking, or based on a non-rational approach to spirituality, they all crumbled. They said, why should I believe just because you say so, just because a particular book says so, just because somebody 100 or 1,000 years ago says so? If it is true, then it should be true now. It's not that it was true in those days, and just because that prophet or that book says, why should it be true now? Can you not follow the same principles? Science doesn't say that because such and such scientist proved it. They say you have the freedom to experiment, do the same experiment and see it for yourself, test it for yourself. So this was the age of verification through scientific principles, principles that required of people following that tradition to verify it actually and experience the truths for oneself. So when it started to be uh, when people started applying it to religion, a lot of young people who were trained in this scientific approach to life, religion, but also life in general, they started questioning everything. They started questioning established faiths. And a lot of people naturally became atheists. So during that period, Sri Ramakrishna came. If you see the gospel, he never asks you to believe anything without testing or without experiencing it yourself. That is the uniqueness. So when it comes to prayer and japa, japa is the repetition of the holy name. Let us just try to find out what they have to say, what the other traditions which preceded Sri Ramakrishna's age. Because in his life, we will see a harmony of all the previous paths, which is unparalleled in the history of the world. You'll find that he accepted his life was so all inclusive that he failed to criticize or condemn any path. However, he says, have you tried? Why do you speak like a irrational person without even testing, without the true scientific spirit requires of you to just not only question, but allow the person or allow the tradition to prove or disprove what is being claimed. Without disproving or without proving, how can one accept? So he applied all these scientific principles. Though he was unlettered, he never went to university, but he would not accept anything right from childhood. If you see his life, and in the gospel, every page you will find he does not ask anybody to believe. He only says, I have verified it. You come and verify. I don't I expect you to take my word for it. That's why when Narayan came for the first time and he said, have you seen God? It's like asking, have you seen what they say, what they refer to as God, as truth? So he not only said, I have seen. In that case, scientifically, if somebody claims that I know the truth of this, but perhaps you do not have access to that, then naturally nobody will follow because they would also like to experience God themselves. So it was a challenge, and he said, yes, I have not only seen him, but I can also show God to you. Whatever may be the concept of God. Naren was not very sure because he was experimenting with a new tradition where God was formless, but he had qualities. Something which Sri Ramakrishna sometimes made fun of. When you expect your God or whatever concept of God you have, to be without form and with full of compassion. How can an impersonal being have compassion? If he has a compassion, he has to have a human form, or you have to accept him in that human form. Whether it is true or not, whether God exists or not, that experience alone will tell. But you just can't deny, nor can you assert that God exists. As Buddha very famously, when he was asked this question, because in those days, a lot of people used to approach Buddha and ask him, do you believe that God exists, without even knowing what the word God means? And he knew these ignorant people are not even keen to know what God is and just asking me out of curiosity. So his flat reply would be, did I say God exists? Then they would immediately jump to some conclusion and say, okay, that means you don't believe that God exists. He would immediately correct them and say, did I say God does not exist? Then that would make them think, what does he mean by that? Does he believe that God exists, or does he not believe that God exists? He just put a counter question. Did I say God exists? Or when he said, okay, you didn't say, that means you don't believe. So how can you say that? His answer, the reason why he gave that answer was that, why are you bothered about something which really does not concern you right now? First of all, that is what Buddha would have explained to that person who was asking this question. First, tell me why you need God. Is it because you are suffering? Is it because there is suffering in life? Okay, if there is suffering in life, if there is a problem in life, I claim, or I can tell you, show you the solution. Is it not sufficient? Does it really matter what kind of God you believe in? So many people thought that he was an atheist. And many people try to prove it also. That's why they say that Buddhism doesn't believe in prayer. Though there are many theistic sects of Buddhism, if you find, where some kind of prayer, some kind of meditation, some kind of repetition of the holy name, you'll find there are many traditions which do practice these things. He didn't denounce it, but he showed that before you could even do that, I show you the eightfold path, the path of right living. If you follow that, your problem is to solve the misery that you are suffering. And through my own experience, I have seen, and you just follow it. You don't just have to believe me. You just have to practice what I myself practiced. And if your experience does not tell you, just give it up. So that's one very rational way of approaching. But when we come to the gospel, Sri Ramakrishna, like a true scientist, we have to start somewhere. Even a scientist begins with a hypothesis. A scientist doesn't say, he just can't insist on anything to be proved first. It has to be a hypothesis. You have to take it for granted, follow the necessary procedure, all the steps, and then if you're not able to prove it, then it doesn't become a theory, it doesn't become a principle, it does not become a law. So that is the scientific approach to religion or truth. So Sri Ramakrishna did exactly the same thing. He was so inclusive that all the paths that lead to realization of God, especially God, the Spirit, something that does not change. Because according to Vedanta, or the tradition of spirituality that is known as Vedanta, it is only in the midst of change that there is suffering. Because anything that is temporary, no matter how nice or how beautiful it is, how wonderful it is. If we don't like the idea of something snatched away from us, we just want to have it eternally. If we have wealth, simple example, if we have wealth, we would like that wealth to remain with us. Nobody would like to be poor. If you have health, you want that health. But unfortunately, that is not seen. Pleasure and pain come as dualities in life. So a true scientific spirit would be not just to brush aside the idea that suffering is an essential part of our life, because that is what evidence tells us. You take up any life, it's never been smooth sailing always. The amount of pleasure and pain may vary, but they come in dualities. You have heat, you have cold. If you see the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna in the second chapter itself tells Arjuna, how much can you avoid? You are trying to avoid this war, you are trying to avoid these dualities, but you can't avoid. As long as you are in the world, pleasure and pain, heat and cold, joy and sorrow, these dualities, you have to live with it. And how do you live with it? Hold on to something which does not change, because the things that change will always trouble you. The things that change means your position, the wealth that you possess, the things that you possess, they are not going to remain the same. Things will change. The body will change. The mind will change. The body will get old. That's what Buddha said. In fact, he was terribly shocked by change. He always thought that life was made so comfortable for him that his father did not want him to see the negative side of life. And the first time he saw the old man, a sick man, a suffering man, a deceased man, said, "Is there? Yes, this is also part of life." So when the time comes to accept these things, accept things as it is. So in Jnana Yoga, Swami Vivekananda says, Maya is nothing. We just use a word Maya without knowing what it is. Maya is nothing but a statement of facts. If you are very truthful to yourself and to others, to everyone around you, then you have to accept things as it is. No amount of convincing yourself or trying to convince others that everything will be fine, everything will be nice. These are all empty words. In this world of change, when things change, when things don't work out the way we like them to work out for us, when we have strong likes and dislikes, and when we get things that we don't like, and the things that we like are grabbed away from us, the situation that status is known as, according to Vedanta, it is Maya. Maya is nothing strange or something that deludes you. It deludes us, no doubt, it deludes the mind, thinking that everything will be smooth. Because we are conditioned in such a way that we do not want the dualities to come. We always want to be happy, but unhappiness comes. We always want to be healthy, and our health breaks down sometimes. So if truth is told, people become uncomfortable. And then, in trying to find a solution, Sri Ramakrishna says, he gives it a nice word, Nitya Anitya Vastu Viveka. Just the gospel, if you find, along with prayer, along with meditation, he first says, try to discriminate between the temporary and the permanent. Without that, our prayer has no meaning. Whom will you pray to? What will you pray for? He explains in the gospel the importance of prayer. Don't pray for things that will ultimately go away. It's very careful. If you don't know how to pray, just tell the Lord. It's in a very simple way. It appears to be a very simple piece of advice, but it is very profound. He said people often don't know what to pray for. So be careful. Don't just pray for things for which you will labor very hard. Go on praying and you will get it, ultimately to lose it after some time. So in the gospel itself, he not only teaches us how to pray, but what to pray for. So that is what the importance of our topic, importance of prayer and japa. Japa is a prelude to meditation. Because meditation, everyone knows, is the most difficult thing to do. It's a very simple word, very commonly used, like yoga. Everybody thinks thinks that he's practicing yoga or he's practicing meditation. It has become a sort of fashion that you ask somebody, "Oh, I'm going for my meditation. I'm going to practice yoga," not knowing. It's like a scientist saying that I'm going to study quantum physics when he doesn't know the fundamentals of physics. It is easy. It is just, these are just words. Similarly, the idea of prayer, it is so important to know what this prayer is and what can we pray for and which prayers are often answered and how they are answered. These are fundamental questions. A rational person, of course, these are not applicable to people with simple faith. They are saved. That's why Sri Ramakrishna used to say, even Holy Mother Sri Sharda, they used to say, if you have faith, you have everything. Then there's no question of inquiring about the efficacy of prayer, how should I, all these things. They just pray because they know of no other way. In fact, Sri Ramakrishna's own life, if you see, he began with prayer and his whole life was full of prayer. If he did not know anything, he used to pray to Mother. You see, I am an ignorant person. These people are confusing me. I don't know what is true. I don't know what the scriptures say. So, Mother, please tell me, what do these Vedas contain? What do these Tantras contain? They say so many things. These Pandits, who so-called scholars, each one comes and gives a different opinion, and all that is happening is confusion. But that is because he had faith that his question would be answered. Faith is not so easy to have. One who has faith has everything. You see, even in the Bible, it says even if you have as much faith as the small mustard seed, you will be delivered, you will be saved. Because even Jesus knew that faith is not such an easy thing to have. Everybody swears that I belong to this faith or I have this faith. But when the faith is tested, people lose all faith. Sri Ramakrishna used to tell that famous story that a person in Hinduism, there are many gods. So once a cottage or a hut was being blown. So that person, because he was confused now which god to pray. So he prayed to one god and he saw that still the hut is shaking. It may be blown off. He prays to the god. Even wind is a god. So Vayu and different gods. And then he sees that none of these prayers are answered. Then he gives up that god and prays to another god. So that is how our prayers are. It's not so easy to have faith. It's very difficult to pray persistently, whether you get results or not. That is what faith really means. Faith is tested. If you see the great prophets, they did not achieve these great heights by just praying once. It was constant, persistent prayer which led them to the high spiritual states that they achieved. So Sri Ramakrishna's own life, if you see the amount of faith he had, the faith year after day, every evening used to cry that one day has passed and I have not realized you. People would give up. That phenomenal faith that he had in the existence of God is not easy to come by, because we have faith in many other things other than God. Only a few, privileged few, will have that childlike faith. That is why in the Bible, Jesus said, unless you have, because for children, faith comes very easily. The children believe in everything they are told, especially the young children. It's only when they grow up, we put a lot of doubts and confusion into their minds. And then they lose their faith. That is why Swamiji, in his famous talk, he said, we have lost that innocence of childhood, which made Jesus say that unless you become like those children, pointing to some very innocent children, you will not reach the kingdom of heaven, except that ye be converted into these children. Because faith comes very easy. The element of doubt, as a result of wrong training, as one grows up, the more the doubts increase, the more difficult it becomes for the prayer to be answered. You know that famous parable, Sri Ramakrishna used to teach through these parables how faith works. There was a milkmaid who used to bring milk, and sometimes when the river was in spate, she could not get a boat and she could not cross the river. And as a result, she would be delayed or she would not be able to deliver milk. And that Brahmin who was used to get his milk delivered by this milkmaid used to shout at her. So she used to try to explain that, see, I have to depend on the boatman. And if sometimes the river is in spate, the boat doesn't come on time, I can't reach. It's not, I'm helpless. And then that Brahmin obviously was a very great scholar. He had heard that in the name of God, many things, miracles can happen. Shouted at her, said, why do you have to wait for the boat? You know, they say just by repeating the name of the Lord, you can walk over water. He was just joking. He was just scolding her. But this lady was a lady of immense faith. So as the parable goes, as the story goes, she walked on water, literally repeated the name, and this Brahmin, who was shocked to see her coming when the river was flooded, there was no boats around. He said, how did you come? He said, you told me that if you just repeat the name, you can just start walking on water. And now this priest, though he was academically a great believer in Shastras, in fact, he had told her to do that, but he himself did not have that faith. So he said, how is it possible? I had just joked. This lady has really come. So let me see, let me test. So he says, let me see, how do you cross? And he goes with her. Then she says, oh, why? What is there? I just repeat the name. See, and she started crossing and he was shocked. He said, she's taking my advice and she's crossing, whereas I should also try. But that fellow, as Sri Ramakrishna very humorously said, was just very keen to see that his cloth does not get wet and was slowly trying to enter the river. And naturally, he repeated the name without any faith and he was about to sink. So the moral of the story is that if one has faith in the efficacy of prayer, it really works. But faith is very hard to come by. So that requires sadhana. As Swamiji says very clearly, we were born with that innocence. The cruel society or the world has snatched away our innocence from us, and the goal of spirituality is to regain that innocence, that childlikeness, not childishness, childlikeness which Christ spoke of. So when he said that unless you become like these children, you cannot enter into the kingdom of heaven, not with your egos, not with the air of superiority that society develops as the so-called education with the help of so-called education, the ill effect of that is that our egos get inflated. And the more it happens, the less spiritual we become. Because the whole of spirituality lies in aligning ourselves to the Supreme Spirit. And what disconnects us from the Lord is this ego. There are various layers which lead to bondage according to Vedanta. The physical body, the pranic body, then we have the mental sheath, the buddhi, different layers of our personality which do not allow the jiva to be connected to the Lord. And the goal of yoga, the goal of prayer, the goal of all spiritual practices is how to establish that connection. Spirituality is as simple as that. So Sri Ramakrishna used to tell many times in the gospel, you will find this. He said, oh, you know what you have to do? Try to find out who you are. Try to find who I am. I, in the sense, he was identified with the Supreme Spirit. And then he said, try to find out what our relationship is. Only these three things you need to do. He told M many times. And M was a little bit being educated in the modern scientific way. He was not able to understand the meaning in the beginning. He said, what does he say? What exactly does he mean? He says you have to do only three things. Try to find out who you are. Try to find out who I am. And what is the connection between us. What he actually meant was that the whole of spiritual life, the whole of yoga, which is to join, means that we are disconnected from our real nature as the infinite, pure and infinite pure consciousness, the pure spirit. And somehow through ignorance, we have got identified with our limitations, our weaknesses, our stupidity, our ego. All these things, the more we accumulate, the more further away we are from God. And prayer is one of the means, japa is also one of the means of removing this ignorance. There's no other higher or even any other better function why we should do prayer and meditation. Any other prayer or any other reason for doing japa is like wasting its, not fulfilling the true purpose of doing those things. So there cannot be any other purpose. That is the warning Sri Ramakrishna gives us. In the gospel, if you see, when Narendra was facing a lot of financial difficulties, and he lost his father, there were a lot of litigations, and the family was trying to throw them out of their house, his mother, his younger brother. So he was literally, somebody told him, why don't you go to Sri Ramakrishna? Maybe his prayer will solve your problems. No doubt, and when one is faced with such situations, one is tempted to do. Even a strong person like Narendra, whose pride would be hurt if somebody told him that you asked for some help. Sri Ramakrishna once or twice even said, I asked such and such a rich person, see his financial condition is bad, why don't you just help Narendra? He used to get angry. They said, why are you pleading? Did I ask for help? He was so full of pride and that kind of, not an unhealthy pride, it was a healthy pride. Why should I seek help when I am myself strong? But when he found that in spite of all the efforts, in spite of all the efforts to save his house, to get a job, which he could not get, there was so much poverty in the house. So naturally, something made him go, and a lot of people advised him. See, Sri Ramakrishna, if he prays to the mother, he is such a powerful person. Definitely, you will get what, at least the basic minimum which you need. You will get, you just go. So he goes. Unwillingly, of course, he goes because he was helpless. And Sri Ramakrishna says, I can't pray for all these things. I have never prayed for these silly things. But then I'm not preventing you. See, just to test him, he says, why don't you go and pray? Today is a good day. You go to the temple. Of course, she can give you. Not that he did not believe that these small things can be granted. Prayer can grant these things. So, not that he did not believe in that, but he said that's not the true purpose. If you see the gospel, he could never pray for those things. So he said, I can't pray, but why don't you yourself go? Of course, Narendra did not even have that kind of faith in the beginning because he felt, being a Brahmo, he felt this idol worship, this puja, and this going to the temple, bowing down before an image is something which his Brahmo Samaj would not permit. So naturally, he was the last person to go. But he thought by somehow if Sri Ramakrishna prays, my problem can be. So he was literally forced. The situation would have been so bad for even a person like Narendra to go and ask, why don't you pray? Because everybody says your prayers will be answered. He said, no, I have never prayed for such silly things. You don't go to a king and pray for vegetables or some paltry thing. You will ask him for the greatest treasures. That's one of the things which Sri Ramakrishna used to teach. You don't go to a king who can give you a lot of treasures and go and pray to him for the silly things of life. The idea was that he wanted to teach Narendra what is the true function of prayer. What does prayer do? What can prayer do for you? And what should be the purpose with which one should pray? So he goes, you know that story, goes 3 times, he goes, somehow he is not able to pray for a little money or for a little. Every time he goes, he prays for faith, he prays for knowledge. That's a very significant event in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, which you'll find constantly being repeated in the gospel. If you see all the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, he never prayed for, he never asked anybody, because that would be, according to him, and according to any spiritual tradition, defeating the very purpose of prayer. Other things you can get through your own effort, but what prayer can achieve for a person in spiritual life cannot be achieved by any of the other worldly tricks or worldly means. That is what I mean when Sri Ramakrishna said that there cannot be a worldly solution to our worldly problems, no matter how much we try. At the most, it will be some kind of patchwork, some kind of postponing the inevitable. We can postpone our death, we can postpone our illnesses, we can postpone all the bad things that might happen, but inevitably one has to accept both the sides of life. Recently, there was a small session for children which we organized on Sunday. The parents were insisting. Perhaps they thought that nowadays in the schools, there is this idea of a lot of conflict. Children there should not be any conflicts. So strangely, I found a book by Swami Ashokananda, who, when he first come to the West, he was just shocked. When he saw, in those days, already the movement had started. Discipline is not good. You should not force a child. Whereas in India, it is the stick is always used. Discipline is used. But here, in the name of freedom, in the name of conflicts, children are not allowed to be exposed. Even if a parent does something like that, the teachers can send you a notice. I was shocked to hear that. You don't put any kind of pressure. So a similar situation in those days, Ashokananda, I'm speaking of 1920s or even much later, when in early 40s or 30s, when he went there, he said, why are you parents so much worried about these small conflicts? According to Indian philosophy, according to Vedanta, conflict is something which you have to face. Why don't you teach the children? It's nothing to be worried about. There will be conflicts. The more the child faces conflicts in life, the more fit he will be when he is on his own. How long can you support him, avoiding all the problems, avoiding the conflict, giving him support in the name of love, in the name of freedom, allowing them, oh no, no, don't do this. It will create conflict. So Ashokanji says, I don't understand what kind of stupid psychology this is. It is only through conflicts that you learn. What's the harm if there is a little conflict in life? Is it not a inevitable thing that you have to face? Everyone has to face sooner or later. The sooner he gets trained, he or she, the child gets trained, the more equipped he will be. It will not require props. He will not depend on anybody to resolve his conflicts. Otherwise, you will end up with counselors, you'll end up with psychiatrists. Because one thought that by avoiding conflicts, like they say in Australia, and these ostriches are there. Sri Ramakrishna used to give that example. Even Swamiji gave that example. The ostrich is a very strange bird. When it faces danger, it starts running. It can run really fast. But when somebody that is chasing the ostrich is running faster than the ostrich just panics. And when it panics, Swamiji has given this a wonderful example. It puts its head in the sand. Because when it does that, when it just digs the sand a little bit and puts its head inside, it cannot see anything. So it thinks it is safe. So he says that is not how we solve the problem. Running away from conflicts will not solve the conflict. In fact, one becomes stronger and tougher by occasionally or regularly allowing this, because conflicts are something that you cannot avoid in life. So when we pray, we should pray according to the gospel for strength, because it is futile to pray and expect God not to give you troubles at all. It is something which is against the nature of this world. As long as these dualities are concerned, the very nature of the world, the very nature of the dual nature of the world is to create conflicts. The only thing that prayer can do is strengthen us in such a way that we can face these conflicts, not run away from the conflicts. So that is what one of the functions of prayers. If you see the wonderful life of Kunti, the mother of the Pandavas, who in fact said that, oh Lord, I am never asking you to solve my problems, because throughout her life she faced only problems. So many setbacks, many not created by herself, but circumstances forced. She lost her husband, the children were forced to go to the forest, they were deprived of their kingdom. Some kind of problem always came. But she never prayed to Krishna. She was very devoted to Krishna to remove the problems. He said, I am happy because at least when these problems come, I am reminded of you. If you solve them, then I might forget you. I might forget the purpose of life, the goal of life. So one thing is very clear. The goal and purpose of prayer is to stabilize our life, to bring some stability in our life, which is definitely not going to be smooth. That doesn't mean we have to always keep expecting that things will go bad. Things will take its own due course. We should not expect anything to happen this way or that way. They will happen, whether we like it or not. Things will move according to our karma, according to according to our, you may say, according to the surroundings, which again are determined by our karma. So the only purpose, true purpose of prayer is to enable us to strengthen ourselves, our faith in the spirit, faith in the eternal spirit within us, which is our true nature, so that these conflicts and these dualities do not disturb us. That is the only goal of life. That is why there is a wonderful word used in Vedanta known as titiksha. In the Gita also, Bhagavan tells Arjuna, Tan titikshasva bharat, agama payino anitya. These temporary things will come and go. Don't be impatient. Good things will come, they will also not last. Bad things also will not last. That's a great relief to know. The bad things or the troubles also will come. They are agama payina. They come and they go. They come and they go. See, knowing fully well their nature is temporary, you just bear. That is one way of handling these dualities. Titiksha. Titiksha means holding on to the Lord, holding on to the Spirit, the unchangeable Spirit, in spite of all the change around us. So that is one of the prayers Sri Ramakrishna asks her to do. Now we come to japa. That is as far as prayer is concerned. And the instructions he gave on prayer, many instructions, if you see throughout the gospel, there are so many instructions he gave how one should pray. He said, you pray in your own language. You don't have to pray, go after these stotras, complicated Sanskrit mantras, pray in this way. It's not just any technique that we have to learn. Prayer is from the heart. Prayer has to be in your own way. It has to come straight from the heart. Words are not so important. That is one aspect of spiritual practice, which is known as prarthana, vyakulta, or yearning. Their language doesn't matter. But there is another tradition or another way which is known as repetition of the holy name. That also depends on the faith. This is a unique, it is also an extension of prayer, but it is slightly in effect and in practice. It works in a slightly different way. It's like using sound vibrations or the positive nature of the sound to solve the problems of life. It is a great science. It is known as, you may call it Tantra, from where the Mantra Shastra has come. Tantra is using the principles of Prakriti, the sound symbols, which we are dealing with every day, consciously or unconsciously. You see, we are using this sound. Every word that we speak, every word that we think, every word that we write makes us what we are. We don't understand the importance of sound. Imagine a world where there is no sound, or no language, or no words. All the development that has taken place, it's all a play of words, a play of sound. So there is one branch of spirituality which is highlighted in the gospel and also in the gospel of Srima Sharda Devi especially, using this very principle of sound to negate the bad effects of sound. Sound, if you see, is intimately connected with an idea. No sound is random. Maybe some sound that we make, even that gives us a suggestion that this is somebody banging the hand on the wooden or on a metal or a bell or a gong. Immediately some ideas comes to the mind, especially when we utter words. Every word has a corresponding idea. So prayer is nothing but using a sound or a phrase. Constantly, if you repeat, the impact of that prayer, that's why they say constant prayer. In the Russian or the Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox Church, they have this prayer, the idea of repetitive prayer, not just praying having a long prayer, but some short prayers which are repeated again and again. Say one of the prayers is in their language, they say, "Oh Lord Jesus, have mercy upon me." They go on repeating. There are this mala also, some kind of rosary. In those days, they used to tie knots on a long rope, and the knots used to be used as beads. So you can find these monks who belong just repeating the same prayer. It appears strange, but this constant repetition gave them that faith that their prayer is answered. So that tradition, the long prayer, which is also there in the Indian tradition, the Gayatri Mantra, which is also a kind of mantra. That's why we call it Gayatri Mantra. But they are long phrases with certain meanings associated with that. And also shorter mantras, shorter bijas, shorter mantras, which is the tradition of japa, which has been a unique feature of the Ramakrishna tradition, especially the gospel of Ramakrishna and the Holy Mother. Though we will not find many such references in the complete works, but that doesn't mean Swamiji did not, one or two places he has explained the meaning of mantra. So what happens when you repeat? It generates a kind of, you may say, energy. It revitalizes, it strengthens our personality when you repeat. Anything that you do with concentration, like the rays of the sun, when it passes, when it is focused, all the different rays, when they are focused, they can burn through the lens. When when it passes through the lens, they have a tendency to focus on one point. That is exactly what happens when all our energies, all our you may say concentration is focused on certain repetitions of certain sound symbols which are considered to be holy. Every religion has that. They may be in the form of prayer, they may be in the form of very short prayers, or they may be in the form of syllables, which is known as mantra in the Indian tradition. And you will find Sri Ramakrishna always saying Nam and Nami, that is the named and the name. And as I often quote, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So much of importance is given to the Word. It's there in the Bible, in other traditions as well. First, he says the Word was with God. The God and the Word were separate, but the Word itself was God. So much of importance is given to the Word. So when you have the Word, when you have these syllables, and when you repeat it with faith, it is like you are in the presence of God. It is not something which is a hypothesis. This has been practiced by hundreds and thousands of saints and who have shown results. In fact, most of the saints in the Indian tradition, if you find, they have achieved everything that they wanted to achieve, especially in the modern age. If you see Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Ma Sharda Devi, Brahmananda, and many other disciples, using the power of the divine name, even Tulsidas and all the other traditions of India, where there are some very nice hymns and songs which say, Lord, I have got your name. Now, whether you reveal yourself or not, I don't care, because I know I have you. When the mantra has been given to me by the Guru, all I have to do is repeat. And Sri Ramakrishna, and I would like to conclude with this, Sri Ramakrishna gives the impact or effect of repeating the mantra in such a beautiful way. When people ask, how do I know that by this constant repetition I will reach some point or some goal? It may just be futile. It may just, I'm just end up wasting my energy. That's a very, very legitimate question for people who don't have faith. Taking for granted that the word and the meaning implied by the word, or the person referred to by that word, Nam and Nami, are not distinct. Even if I accept that, how can just a repetition of this name can lead me to that goal? So he gives the beautiful example of a chain. He was, in those days in the Ganga, the best way to store the huge logs of timber which used to come by ship, because there was so much shortage of land. And to season the timber, you have to, huge logs would be dropped into the river bank. But then they will float away. The current of the river will float. They will not only float, but they'll just flow away, go to the tide will take them towards the sea. So they used to be tied with long chains. Of course, the chains would not be seen. Only on the bank of the river, they would be tied, and the other end of the chain would be, most of the logs were heavy, they would perhaps be submerged in the water. Very, very heavy logs. But all these chains, which one could see on the shore, the person who owned them knew that the logs are still there because they were not allowed to float away or be washed away. They would be tied to that. So Sri Ramakrishna used to give this wonderful example. You would see this often. And he says, just as you see that chain, holding one link, you go to the other link, you go. You have to go with faith because you do not know where will it lead you. Because everything is underwater. But if you have faith, then one day, sooner or later, you'll reach the log. That is how the effect of mantra is. Many times, faith is shaken. Because we know these things really will lead you. But then it requires some kind of faith or conviction to begin with. The power of the name of the Lord and its effectiveness in helping us to reach the goal. That is what Sri Ramakrishna again and again says, that by repetition, Japat Siddhi, as Holy Mother said, quoting Sri Ramakrishna, of course, she said that the power of name, he also gave another example. He said Hanuman had so much faith in Rama that just by repeating his name, Jambavan told him about his strength, and he said, just repeat, you have so much faith. You can just jump over the sea and reach the other side. He said Hanuman had so much faith that he did not require a bridge to cross the sea, whereas Rama himself had to build a bridge to enable himself and others to go. So that is the power of faith. We find it so many times in the gospel. And it appears to be a very simple advice. But if we just go, we see the instances of history, how many people, all could not be wrong. If one or two cases, if we find this sadhana or this method is effective in reaching the goal, then it is, you may say that there are other better methods. But for a majority of the people, the repetition of the name, at least in the Indian tradition, has been a great influence in cultivating spiritual life and reaching heights of spirituality, experiencing the truth, experiencing the reality in whatever form they started. It was their faith in the repetition of the holy name that not only helped them to reach the goal, but also helped them to understand the true nature of their God. The God that whom they worshipped as an image, the same God of which they became a part and parcel at a higher stage. And still, if they did not stop, they continued with the name, higher and higher truths. As Sri Ramakrishna said, even if you are ignorant, you begin your journey. Somebody or the other will guide you, and the Lord himself will guide you in different forms and tell you what he really is. So we begin with faith, and prayer and japa and meditation are the two techniques where faith plays a very big important part. Not just faith, not just belief. There's a difference between belief and faith. Faith is something which is translated as Shraddha. The original Sanskrit word is Shraddha. Shraddha means faith with conviction. Just as you have the conviction that the chain, each link will take you to the log which is not apparently visible to you, which you do not know, but ultimately you know it is going to lead you to that timber log. So also in the initial stages, one has to have faith, but if one persists, it leads you to the ultimate goal. So I think I'll conclude now. If there are some questions, you can. It's 4:15, I think.
Yeah. That is stopping the Zoom or is going?
No, Zoom is okay, fine.
Okay.
But should I stop?
No, it's up to you, man.
If there are some questions, I'll repeat the question.
Sure.
Just one or two. Then we can have discussions.
Sure, man. I have got one question I can start with, Maharaj.
Yes.
But you spoke about the importance of faith and meditation and prayer. That's very nicely explained, Maharaj. Thank you for that. But for people like us who are like, devotees or we are sanctuaries, what is the advice for the best way to do the prayer?
You see, it's not a question that prayer is not different for different people. There can be, as I said, there is only the question asked now is for the benefit of Zoom viewers. The question is, Sri Ramakrishna's advice on prayer and faith is a wonderful means of reaching the goal. But people who are immersed with their problems in the world, what is the prayer that we should do? What's the kind of prayer, or how should we pray?
How partly? What we understand
how to pray. Okay, well, what is the nature? What should be the nature? As I told you, whether one is a monastic or whether is householder, or you see, it's just a way of life that is different. The goal cannot be different. The goal is same whether one is a householder or a monk. The means, as I told you, the means are different. Just as some people follow the path of prayer, some people follow the path of japa, some people follow other paths, the path of knowledge. So paths may be different, but the goal doesn't change. Now the question comes, how should one pray? So if you see the gospel, the best prayer, he said, is since we do not know what we should pray for, let us leave that choice to the Lord himself. If we have faith in a personal God, and if we firmly believe that he will guide us properly, then we should have more faith in his decision. So even for people who don't have faith, once somebody asked Sri Ramakrishna, then he said, okay, why don't you pray like that? Oh Lord, I don't have faith. So please give me faith. Suppose you begin with that prayer, even that will have its effect. So Sri Ramakrishna was very particular that there's no need to wait to find out what is the right method of prayer. Just pray. You tell the Lord that I don't know how to pray. I don't have faith. I don't have both. So now you teach me. So invariably, it is like he used to give the example, somebody wants to go to Puri. So if he says that I will ask everybody, and when I get the correct direction, then I'll start. Otherwise, I'll stay at home. He said, no, it's not necessary. Just start. You go out, maybe you go on the wrong way. Then somebody will say, no, this is not the way. You go to the right. And there somebody else will say, oh, this is correct. Till here you are right, but now you have taken the wrong road. You go this way. So Sri Ramakrishna is to believe that there is no time or no particular method for prayer. It is the yearning or the desire, and one of the important things he said about prayer is, if you don't know what to pray for, leave it to God. You just have to pray. That is why they say repetition of the name. Just plain repetition of the name, where you don't pray for a particular thing. You just repeat. So somebody asked Yudhishthira. Sri Ramakrishna gives that example also, and Swamiji quotes it. He said, what do you gain by just looking at the Himalayas? He used to watch the Himalayas, and he was wonderstruck by the beauty. He said, I may not get anything, but I just love the Himalayas. That's why I just see it. So that is one of the attitudes. He said, if you love the ideal, you love, or if you have faith, or some working faith to begin with, that the ultimate, holding on to the ultimate, or holding on to somebody whom you consider as a ultimate goal in life, will solve all your problems. So whether you have a right conception of that truth or not, the very fact that you are eager to go, whether very fact that you are eager to go to Puri will one day take you to Puri. That's the idea. So one does not have to classify that this is the prayer for householders, this is the prayer. Prayer is the same. That I don't know how to pray, or I don't know what exactly to pray, or what is good for me. But what is good for my, one of the good, the best prayers is to give the responsibility to the Lord. So whatever is good for me, because I do not understand what is good for me. Sometimes certain unpleasant things also may be good for me. Medicine is unpleasant, but even bitter medicine is good for me. So I do not know what is good or bad for me. Instead of going after prayers or the thing that gives us pleasure, go after things that are good. And if I don't know, you pray that get only the good. I mean, give me only if you feel it is good. So a kind of self-surrender where we do not know what is good for us, and it is safer to leave the choice to the Lord, knowing our inability to make the right choices in life. Very often we make the wrong choice, because when Shreya and Preya come, even Yama tells Nachiketa, it is very difficult to make the right choice in life. We think we make a right choice because it is a path of maybe least resistance. You find it more comfortable. But sometimes uncomfortable paths also may be really good for you. Though it may be uncomfortable in the beginning, like the medicine that we take. It's uncomfortable, bitter in the beginning, but ultimately it does you good. So also in life, different situations of life, it is extremely difficult to know what to pray for. So a general prayer, like you know what is good for me. In fact, it is part of everybody's Upasana booklet. Okay, I do not have these things, but please get it done through me. Whatever is good for me, you get it done through me. That is the best prayer for all, irrespective of whether you are a householder. Because at that stage of life, what is good for you, you will get it done. If your situation changes, then he will do that which is good for you at that stage. One need not think of that stage now. Whatever stage we are in, do under the present circumstances. So that's a very natural and natural way of praying.
Thank you, man.
What can I ask?
Yeah.
So, I mean, on the first 10 minutes, I not completely understand. I mean, the rest of your speech, I completely understand. It is really, really insightful for me. It's not because that I am really spiritual person. I'm probably the least spiritual person in this room. Because you...
That also you should not judge.
Yeah.
That means you know about spirituality. Whether you are spiritual or not, let God decide.
Because most of the time when you are making a statement, you are explaining so logically and giving the natural truth, the examples. So it's very easy to understand, very easy to believe, and there is no doubt. The first 10 seconds, the first 10 minutes, I did not understand, because when you say, when we have problems, and most of the time the worldly solution, maybe not the right way, we have to
Maybe
find...
not the perfect way.
Maybe
I'm not saying some patchwork we can do. We have to do.
Yes.
See, for example, now you are hungry. You can't say God will give me food. You have to go and cook and eat, isn't it? But no, I'm talking of a permanent solution.
Okay. Yes.
Temporarily, definitely your hunger is mitigated.
Mhm.
You can't, then you will be depending and say, I'll not do anything. I'll just sit in my house. Let God give me everything. I'm not mean, that is a misunderstanding.
Yes. Of course.
So it will not solve a problem in a permanent way, but I did not say it will not solve. Worldly solutions can solve a problem in a uh, for the time being. Time being. See, till we have so much of 100% faith in God, self-surrender does not come. There are people who depended totally on God. If you see the history of great spiritual people, they had tremendous faith. They just waited. Whatever happens, let God decide. But they are exceptional people. That is our ultimate goal. The Sharanagati, they say Girish Chandra Ghosh had that. He thought it is very easy because when he said, I can't do anything, I can't pray, I can't do japa, even once I can't remember your name. Then Thakur told him, okay, if you can't do anything, then give me the power of attorney. I will do everything. So he thought, oh, wonderful, I don't have to do anything. But it is so difficult not to do anything. When you are hungry, you just can't wait for God to give you food. You have to go and prepare the food. So I'm not saying you have to do everything that you are doing, but ultimately, along with that, you have to pray that the worldly solutions which I am seeking, I am doing it as a temporary measure. But ultimately, please solve this problem once for all. That is known as mukti or freedom. In the Indian philosophy, they tried all solutions and finally found that till you are free from the bondage of this changing world, you will not have peace. Thus, I'll end with a wonderful example which Thakur gave. It is apparently a very simple example, but it is very profound. There was a bird who was sitting on the mast of a ship and it fell asleep. It did not even realize that the ship has left the shores. It was definitely staying somewhere nearby, but it wanted some breeze or maybe just wanted to sleep on the top. It perched on the top of the mast and the ship just left and went miles and miles away from the shore. And the bird suddenly woke up and then he said, oh, now I have to go home. How do I go home? So it started flying to the west. It went on and on and on. He saw there's no shore. So he said, no, perhaps I'm wrong. But it was tired, so it had to come and sit on the mast again. It said, let me try the east. So whichever direction it went, the boat had perhaps gone so far away, it was not able to find the shore. Then finally it understood, now best thing is to sit. At least here I am safe. I will not be tired. Someday or the other, these people who are there, they will go to some shore or go back to the shore from where they came. That time I'll go. So it just reconciled. So that flying is what we are doing now. We have to fly. That doesn't mean that we should not fly. But ultimately, when we sit on the mast, when that self-surrender comes, then our problems are solved. That's the idea. So the first 10 minutes, yeah, yes,
Just a quick one,
yes,
not a question as such, but wasn't very sure of coming today, the distance in the bus and then coming and sitting there. But I got a peak experience when you said, Thakur said that if you have faith, you have everything.
yes,
And of recently, I had to make a decision with regards to life-threatening operation. And I spoke to a friend's mother, and she is very much into Ramakrishna faith and Sharma. And she said, "Tomar Atoshanman achi, you have got a lot of faith in yourself. Atoshanman is the right word." She said, "Have faith." And since that day, faith has really helped me. And today it just validated. Basically, I keep thinking about faith all the time.
yes,
And Sheikh Thakur, and
yeah.
whoever Thakur I want to believe in, or myself even.
Thakur means reality. Any
Exactly.
reality which does not change, which is always eternally present for us. That is, whether you say Thakur or Jesus or any other God whom you consider to be eternal, who will be your constant support, irrespective of what happens. Other people may or may not support you all the time. But something which is deep within the self,
Yeah.
according to Vedanta, that self is always our own. You don't have to search. So that doesn't go away. So that faith is real faith, Shraddha. Faith in others will help, definitely will help. We should have faith. If the person doesn't have faith in the doctor, in the people around him, he can't do anything. But that faith is temporary. It has to be there, but to a certain extent. But ultimately, we have to train ourselves to have faith in the something which is eternal, which we call as God, or any prophet or anything, which we believe or we have a working faith that it will help us. So faith that way can definitely help if you stick to that faith. But as I said, that faith should not keep on changing. Then it is not faith. If whatever faith you hold on to, you should stick to it. That is why this japa is, once you get the mantra, you go on repeating. You should not get tired that, okay, now this does not work, I go to another God. Then that is not faith. Because if you had full faith, you have to still trust. You go on trusting till you accomplish the goal. That is the idea behind the faith as explained by Sri Ramakrishna. So we will conclude now here. On the Zoom, I'll conclude.
Yeah.
Okay. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
So for everyone.